Now let's bring in the economist Xhanti Payi. Xhanti, it's always been about the economy. Even there's the comments there by ordinary South Africans. You know, unemployment is an issue, and then of course corruption.
Sure, and I think actually, you know, while it's always been about the economy, what is getting worse is sort of the issues now are getting compounded. For example, on the employment, it has now taken another turn in terms of now thinking about, you know, issues of xenophobia, competition with workers from outside the country. And so now the issues are actually becoming escalating or are getting more and more complex. And I think this is one of the things that we have to actually be careful about. We know, for example, also we've been talking about issues, you know, in terms of infrastructure, energy. That seems to be now, well, that has always been a discussion. Now we're talking about the cost of that energy, the availability of the energy, and really the detrimental effects that it's going to have on industry and on job creation. We're starting to see that actually being highlighted more and more. I know some of the smelters coming in, you know, the mining industry complaining quite a lot. It's also the same thing around, you know, issues of Transnet and the ports. All of these things are things we've been talking about, but they seem to be worsening and gaining a different kind of hue and kind of focus that we need to actually give to them if we're going to be successful.
So what should the president tell us? I mean, to give us a bit of hope, to say, okay, things can be different. Do we need another Tumamina moment?
I think what we need is the president to sort of give out a very clear update in terms of what work has been there. And then, of course, what other, you know, targets that are being done and how we are actually getting close to that. But more important than that, how actually each sector of society can help contribute towards those improvements. So, for example, if I think about issues around, you know, logistics, transport, the issues around our ports, there can be some discussion around, for example, what kind of discussions are being had with the private sector, what role, you know, they're inviting in terms of other sectors. One of the things I thought was interesting was, you know, the State of the Nation address. The president continued to talk about this idea of a compact. And perhaps that compact needs to come alive now in terms of where people have made commitments and how we move forward, because I think that's now the big area in terms of how we actually move forward.
You know,
so
you mentioned yeah, you mentioned the issue of a compact, and as you were saying, I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, is the government doing enough to get the private sector to invest? I mean, the private sector, private business in South Africa has been reluctant for a long time. A few years ago, remember, there was a talk of a kind of a domestic investment boycott of sorts.
Yes, I think that's very, very important. And I think one of the key areas where the private sector has to participate is where, especially where the government does not have the kind of funds that are necessary to actually help us to move forward. Remember, we are also now facing financial constraints where in previous years, while there's been constraints, they have not been as deep and as heavy as this. I mean, the Minister of Finance tells us that we might need to borrow some 600 billion this year. That's a huge amount of money. So we need to bring in, while we borrow, we need to bring in the private sector to co-invest with government, because I think an important part in that co-investment allows us then to share the risks that are out there and be able actually to share the benefits that we need to create in the economy. So one of the key things around this compacts is really a way where the private sector and government are working together to share both the risks and then to create the opportunities and the jobs and the growth that we need in the economy. So I think the main thing around this compact now is how everybody actually brings in themselves, their strength, their pockets, in order for us to move forward. And I think you can talk about that even in terms of this issue around the spectrum, that in order for us to move forward in the spectrum, there's going to have to be some kind of compact or some agreement so that everybody comes to the table and says, we're not going to be in court, we're going to be able to work this out together, private sector and the public sector, to actually move forward to create the communication technologies that we need to move forward. So I think it's very important that actually the president, while he's been that guy that we always knew him to be, everybody said, you know, he's the guy who can be a deal maker. He comes from the private sector. We need that kind of engagement more than we've ever needed before.
So on Thursday, we need to see, in your view, we need to see the deal maker coming to the fore. But what about people who say, can I trust this guy? Because, I mean, we're told research after research that the levels of trust in government and institutions, and on the back of the state capture reports, we've had 2 chapters already. People are saying, can we trust? Because if I want to be an investor, whether I'm domestic or foreign, I need to make sure that I can trust. Or is that not a factor, Xhanti?
it's a huge factor. Remember, the main thing that everybody has been talking about, this idea both of business confidence, but also of consumers and investor confidence, because all of us need to trust that if we, for example, put in our energy, we're going to be able to take out something. So, for example, one of the key things that many people have talked about is the stabilizing of the labor sector and making sure that people work together, the employers and the employees work together to move forward. But can we actually trust each other? And I think another important way we can foster that trust is to bring everybody in. Now, South African engagements are such that we have not been able to actually being able to say what are the commitments of each party and also be very sector specific. Remember, we like to think very much on a very high convoluted basis. What we need to think about now is how we think sector by sector, problem by problem, in order for us actually to be able to move forward. And that will require a lot of trust. And I think some of the things that actually make it trust is when we all have a stake together so that we can all hold each other accountable. Because again, accountability has been a big measure. So we are emerging now finally from COVID-19. We've had some lessons. We need to invest. We've lost jobs. We've lost incomes. We need to now think about how we actually move forward together and take this opportunity, because we are now starting to emerge. There are some good signs of opportunity in different sectors, whether you're thinking about tourism, we're thinking about agriculture, we're thinking about industry, retail. So as that picks up, we need to take advantage of that momentum and make sure that we're actually pushing it forward.
Xhanti, finally, in the last minute or so that I have with you, come Thursday, the president has spoken and you are looking in and you go, so, wow, this was the speech I expected. This is the kind of message I wanted to hear. What would that sound like to you?
Look, it would sound very much like we have had, what the updates have been on the key issues that we've talked about. So infrastructure, I would refer very much to the issues around Transnet, energy, the cost of electricity, what he thinks about how we're going to manage the cost of electricity, because it's going to destroy us. And that stability, if we don't do that right, I'd be very happy to hear that there's a plan for that to make sure that that is managed. And then I'd be very happy to think about how we are actually going to move towards closer in supporting those areas of the economy that will create jobs quickly. That's agriculture, that would be tourism. So if I heard some things about those three things, and then of course, how then we bring in young people in particular in all these sectors of the economy and how he actually plans to invest on that. And then of course, just to suggest, of course, that can be carried through as we move closer to the budget, right? Because that's the most important thing. So if he says all of these things, everybody please expect the Minister of Finance to make clear announcements about this, then I'd say we are moving forward.
Thank you very much for your insights, as usual, Xhanti Payi. He's an economist, of course, helping us here to preview and as we build up to Thursday here on eNCA, DSTV channel 43.